The routine settled quietly after the family visit. To everyone else, nothing had changed. At the university, Kira maintained her usual composure, the precision and control in her posture, in her voice, in every measured movement, an unspoken rule she never broke. Her lectures were clear, her responses concise, her attention always professional. At home, the exterior softened slightly, but not enough for anyone outside to notice. The house retained its calm rhythm, the rooms quiet and orderly, the air carrying the faint scent of her careful habits, a lingering trace of her presence in every corner. Dao noticed the small changes, subtle as they were, details that would seem inconsequential to anyone else. A lunchbox left on the kitchen counter in the morning, its lid slightly askew, marked a quiet intention. A short message sent during the day appeared on her phone, simple in wording, ordinary, yet threaded with attention that wasn't there before. "Did you eat?" It said, a question never explicitly asked, but implied a care folded into a single line. Or Kim waiting in the living room when Dao returned late from campus, sitting upright on the edge of the sofa, eyes attentive but unintrusive, noting her arrival without words. Nothing romantic, nothing overt, only a careful attentiveness that made every familiar motion feel charged. Every gesture, small as it was, carried a weight Dao had not anticipated. Each one reminded her of boundaries and connections, lines drawn and crossed in imperceptible ways, and in the quiet intimacy of routine, everything had shifted, though subtly. One afternoon, Dao arrived early at the university. The campus streets bathed in the golden hue of a late morning sun. Students milled around in clusters, voices carrying across the quad, laughter bouncing off the brick and glass facades. Dao slipped into the lecture hall before the crowd thinned, taking her usual seat in the third row. She opened her notebook, fingers brushing the soft texture of the paper, pens lined meticulously beside it. That was when she noticed the girl, a student from another department, someone she had seen in passing before. Confidence radiated from her posture, her style was deliberate, her gaze aware, calibrated to draw attention. She leaned against Chem's desk with casual ease, a quiet assertion of space and presence that seemed to illuminate the room. The girl's voice carried softly, sweetly, yet with a resonance designed to be heard. "Professor, I'm still confused about the research proposal." Chem responded with the calm, neutral tone Dao knew so well, instructing the girl that while submitting questions via email worked, in-person explanations made understanding easier. The words themselves were neutral, almost sterile, but the subtle sway of proximity, the deliberate lean toward Chem, made the air feel thicker, charged. Most professors would have taken a step back, created distance, but Chem did not. She continued her explanation, the voice steady, her posture unchanged, her attention unwavering, as if the student's presence was merely another element in the lecture, nothing more. Dao's hands gripped her pen, knuckles whitening against the pressure, a quiet tremor she did not fully understand. There was no impropriety in Chem's actions, yet the smallest gestures reverberated through Dao's awareness, unexpected and unsettling. The girl laughed softly at something Chem said, the sound light and airy, and Dao's jaw tightened in response. Class began, the chatter faded, the focus shifted, yet the memory of that proximity lingered. Chem's voice carried through the room with its usual professionalism, steady and unwavering. Midway through the lecture, her gaze flickered, brief but unmistakable, toward Dao. Only for a second, almost imperceptible, yet in that fraction of time, Dao felt recognized, singled out. Instinctively, she lowered her eyes, letting her pen trace lines across the page, seeking refuge in notes and diagrams. Later, as Dao exited the classroom with friends, the same student passed by, offering a faint smile, casual, almost incidental. Her words were light, meant to be unnoticed. "Professor Chem is really patient." Dao forced a polite acknowledgement, a smile that barely touched her lips. The girl commented lightly about Dao's luck in being able to take more classes with Chem. Dao said nothing, her attention already on the hallway stretching ahead, the echo of footsteps blending with her thoughts, a quiet awareness settling in her chest. The evening brought a different kind of quiet. The house was still, emptied of familial presence. The rooms retained the faint warmth of earlier visits, the lingering scents and voices now absent, leaving only the echo of their departure. The bedrooms remained shared, the legal fiction of separation unspoken and unneeded, a space neither fully claimed nor fully private. Chem sat at the desk again, laptop open, glasses sliding slightly down her nose, posture relaxed yet inherently alert. Her voice carried gently across the room. "You're late," she noted, matter of fact, referencing a group project meeting. Dao placed her bag on a chair, hesitated, then spoke casually of the earlier encounter at the university, her tone measured. Chem paused, absorbing the detail, her expression unreadable. "That happens," she said finally, and Dao nodded, the small acknowledgement a bridge over unsaid tensions. Later, Dao stepped onto the balcony, inhaling the cool evening air. The city lights spread beneath her, scattered and distant, a canvas of flickering color that seemed to soften the edges of her thoughts. Chem joined her quietly, standing beside her without fanfare. The night wrapped them in a subtle intimacy, the silence between them heavy with presence. Dao's eyes followed the faint movements of distant cars, streetlights casting faint shadows on the railing. Her hair brushed her cheek in the gentle breeze. Without thinking, Chem reached out, fingers brushed against the strand, tucking it back behind Dao's ear. The gesture was careful, deliberate, yet lingering, a subtle claim and acknowledgement woven together. The moment stretched, soft and unspoken, the closeness carrying warmth without need for words. The distance between them had shrunk imperceptibly, and in the quiet of the night, Dao felt the weight of presence and care, subtle, powerful, undeniable. Dao's breath hitched, caught in the quiet gravity of the balcony. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to contract around them. The distant hum of the city, the flickering streetlights, the faint rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, all of it faded, leaving only the weight of presence pressing against presence. Their closeness was immediate and unavoidable. The warmth of each other's breath brushed the edges of their awareness, a soft heat that seemed to ignite something inside both of them. Dao's heart skipped and stuttered in ways she didn't fully understand, a rhythm not her own, yet dictated entirely by Chem's presence. Her name slipped past her lips almost without thought, soft and hesitant Chem. Not professor, not the formal title that separated them in public, just Chem. The sound hung between them, fragile, intimate, something both unspoken and entirely uncontainable. Chem's chest tightened ever so slightly, a subtle constriction in the quiet of the balcony. Her hand lingered lightly against Dao's cheek, a touch both deliberate and gentle, as if it were a silent declaration. The moment expanded, heavy and almost unbearable in its simplicity. The thought of a kiss, fleeting and terrifying, flashed through both their minds. It was a possibility that felt like fire at the edges, dangerous yet thrilling, impossible yet magnetic. Chem's gaze drifted down briefly to Dao's lips, almost unconsciously, almost tenderly, a glance loaded with intent that Dao could not ignore. Her heartbeat leaped violently, echoing in her ears, her chest tight with sudden awareness. The world tilted for a fraction of a second, as if reality itself had shifted and left only possibility in its wake. The moment became too intense, too real to linger, and instinctively, both of them stepped back at the same time. Embarrassment flushed their faces, a soft heat that tingled along their skin, a shared acknowledgement of what nearly happened and what it had done to them. Dao laughed softly, covering her face, the sound light but colored with tension, a release that barely contained the swirling emotions. Chem cleared her throat, professional yet tinged with unease, the gesture small but revealing in its significance. A long silence stretched between them, thick with all the words that were impossible to say. Even in stillness, they felt the change that had occurred, subtle but profound. Finally, Dao spoke quietly, suggesting that sleep was necessary. Chem agreed, calm in tone but aware of the unspoken currents running between them. They walked back inside together, soft footsteps in the quiet room, careful not to disturb the fragile tension that clung to the air. Nothing more happened that night, yet when the lights went off and they lay on opposite sides of the bed, sleep eluded them both. The usual calm of night had shifted into a subtle storm of awareness, an invisible thread of desire, attention, and jealousy that neither could name fully but both could feel acutely. The following days carried a strange, deliberate quiet. It wasn't awkward in the obvious way, nor was it tense in a way others could notice. It was careful, precise, threaded with awareness. At the university, Chem returned to her usual composed self, the precision of her lectures sharp, structured, efficient. Not a single student could guess the private turbulence, the almost violation of boundaries that had occurred quietly on a balcony, a moment suspended in time. Dao sat in her usual third-row seat, notes meticulously arranged, occasionally glancing toward the front. Each time their eyes met, both looked away first, subtle yet charged, a silent acknowledgement of what had passed, and what might linger indefinitely. Even beyond campus, the tension followed them like a shadow. That evening, Chem attended dinner with her childhood friends, laughter and conversation surrounding her. The teasing began, playful and light, their curiosity weaving around the unspoken reality of her marriage. Comments about age differences, titles, and the unusual pairing flowed easily, each word threading a subtle awareness into Chem's thoughts. She sipped her drink slowly, letting the silence linger, allowing the others to feel the weight behind her measured calm. The conversation, though teasing, was gentle, playful, a mirror to the emotional currents she kept tightly controlled at home. Her friends' laughter carried a warm curiosity, and Chem allowed herself a quiet acknowledgement of feelings she hadn't fully faced yet. Back home, Dao sat on the edge of the bed reading, a lamp casting a soft glow over the page, while Chem entered quietly. The exhaustion in Chem's movements was heavier than the ordinary fatigue of teaching, shoulders tense, posture stiff, eyes shadowed with strain. She placed her laptop on the desk, the quiet clack of keys filling the room as she returned to work, emails demanding attention. Dao's gaze lingered on her, soft concern threading through the familiar rhythm of their coexistence. Chem continued, absorbed in the task, hands moving automatically across the keyboard, posture slouched just enough to reveal the burden she carried. Dao exhaled, a soft sound of awareness, a subtle recognition of the limits she could feel but not voice. 2 nights later, Dao woke to the light still burning at the desk. Chem was there, still working, her form bent slightly over the laptop, a quiet slouch betraying fatigue beyond the normal hours of labor. Dao murmured her name, soft and low, carrying warmth and concern drawing her attention. Chem continued absorbed in her work, the quiet glow reflecting off her face, highlighting the delicate tension in her jaw, the subtle strain in her shoulders. Dao leaned forward, drawn by the combination of wariness and strength, the quiet intimacy of shared space pressing upon them both. The room held its own silence, heavy and alive, the night a witness to presence, care, and a closeness neither dared fully articulate. Every glance, every quiet breath, every small motion became amplified, the space between them charged with anticipation and restraint. The almost touches, the lingering awareness of each other's nearness, the subtle shifts in posture and focus, all of it created a delicate tension that neither fully understood but both deeply felt. Their world, once clearly divided between professional, private, and personal, now bent, stretched, and shimmered under the weight of unspoken desire, intimacy, and a growing, quiet connection that would not be easily ignored. Stillness hung in the room, thick and heavy. Dao watched Chem's fingers hover over the keyboard, frozen yet faintly trembling, her eyes closed as shallow breaths escaped between parted lips. The exhaustion radiating from her was undeniable, a physical presence that made Dao's chest tighten. She moved closer, softly shaking Chem's shoulder, the motion deliberate, careful, almost reverent. Chem's eyelids fluttered open, blinking slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, a thread of consciousness threading back into the room. "You almost passed out," Dao said, her tone steady but gentle, carrying a weight of concern that Chem could not dismiss. Chem muttered about being tired, her words clipped, habitual, but the subtle falter in her stance betrayed the truth. She tried to rise, but her balance wavered, and Dao instinctively reached for her arm, steadying her. Chem leaned lightly against Dao, a rare vulnerability that neither had seen before. The woman who always held herself with perfect composure now allowed a fraction of weakness to seep through, and the sight lodged in Dao's chest with a mix of protectiveness and something deeper she hadn't admitted to herself. "You're going to bed," Dao said, firm, deliberate, letting no room for protest. Chem's sharp refusal came out of habit, a reflex born from years of pushing limits, but Dao softened, her hands gentle as she guided her toward the bed. Chem lay down slowly, the weight of exhaustion bending her movements, unable to muster energy for argument or insistence. Dao's fingers found the glass of water on the bedside table, holding it out without a word. Chem accepted it, the quiet acknowledgement of care passing between them, heavier than any conversation could be. The silence that followed was different, denser, threaded with intimacy, a shared understanding of presence and attention. Dao perched on the edge of the bed, watching her, the space between them charged with quiet awareness. "You do this every night," Dao murmured, a soft observation rather than a critique. Chem's stillness spoke for itself, a silent admission. "I've always worked like this," Chem replied, habitual and low, her voice lacking defense, as though the acknowledgement of her own overexertion had been made unnecessary by Dao's steady gaze. Dao's attention never wavered. "Well, you can't anymore," she stated, soft yet firm, her voice carrying authority that came naturally from concern and affection intertwined. Chem's eyes met hers, registering the depth behind her words, the truth that someone finally refused to allow her to exhaust herself into oblivion. Dao's words landed with a softness that contradicted their weight. "Because someone should take care of you." Chem studied her face, the familiar lines of fatigue softened by the glow of the lamp. Since when? The unspoken words lingered between them, the question not necessary, the meaning understood. Dao's shrug was subtle, dismissive yet definitive. "Since you almost collapsed on your laptop," she said simply, matter of fact, letting the gravity of the moment carry itself without embellishment. Neither spoke for a heartbeat, the tension settling like a living thing, vibrating softly between them. Chem's quiet admission that Dao need not worry hung in the air, fragile and tentative, while Dao's eyes held steady. "I know," she whispered, a truth threaded through quiet observation, and yet she did not look away. Slowly, instinctively, Dao reached forward, her hand brushing a stray strand of hair from Chem's forehead. The motion was gentle, careful, and unthinking, yet it lingered with an intimacy neither had voiced aloud before. Chem stilled, the weight of her gaze meeting Dao's, holding and pulling at the unspoken tension between them. The air thickened, saturated with memory of the balcony night, mirrored in the closeness of the space, but now intensified, far more immediate and urgent. Dao's fingers rested lightly near Chem's temple, a physical tether in the charged quiet. Chem's breathing slowed, deliberate, conscious, and for a suspended second, neither moved, suspended in the gravity of proximity and unspoken longing. Dao pulled her hand back, awareness flushing her cheeks, her heart pounding with the quiet thrill of restrained desire. "Don't apologize," Chem's voice was softer than usual, a whisper threaded with warmth and calm authority, untangling the slight embarrassment without diminishing the intensity of the moment. Dao rose abruptly, asserting control over the situation without breaking the fragile intimacy. "You should sleep," she said, her tone carrying both firmness and tenderness. Chem nodded, the motion almost imperceptible, a quiet acceptance of care. Yet as Dao moved to leave, Chem's voice threaded across the space, calling her back in a quiet, deliberate note. "Dao." Dao turned, eyes meeting Chem's again, the pause between them heavy with meaning. Chem's tone softened as she continued. "Thank you. a word weighted with genuine gratitude and quiet acknowledgement of effort and attention. Dao's smile followed, faint but warm, carrying the acknowledgement that small acts of care had far-reaching significance. Chem exhaled, a small weight lifting, her tension easing slightly as the gesture was received. The laugh that followed, soft and genuine, filled the room with warmth and quiet intimacy, a sound that had been missing for days. Dao turned off the desk lamp, the room now darkened, yet the emotional current between them felt sharper, brighter, almost tangible. Something unnameable had shifted, deep and undeniable, threading through every breath and glance, a quiet surge impossible to resist. Morning arrived with gentle sunlight spilling through pale curtains, the warmth soft yet insistent. Dao lingered, staring at the ceiling, the calm of the new day filtering slowly into her consciousness. The memory of last night lingered, Chem's exhaustion etched in her mind, the almost collapse an echo of vulnerability that had unsettled and grounded her at once. Dao rose, exhaling softly, a murmured realization of the relentless pace Chem maintained. She moved toward the kitchen, the quiet determination of care guiding her. Chem's disregard for meals, reliance on coffee and work alone, demanded intervention. Dao set to work, experimenting with simple dishes, eggs, rice, something nourishing, edible, prepared with precision born of concern. The kitchen became a controlled chaos, scattered ingredients and utensils arranged in hurried but careful motion. After 20 minutes, the room looked lived in but welcoming. Food was neatly packed into a lunchbox, some remaining on the table as a quiet offering. Chem entered, dressed for work, pausing to take in the sight. Prepared food, carefully arranged, attention manifest. Dao stood beside the table, spoon in hand, a quiet pride threading through her posture. Chem examined the plate with a careful eye, tasting a small bite, chewing thoughtfully, nodding at the care and effort reflected in each element. Dao allowed herself a small, fleeting smile, teasing lightly about future praise once improvement was shown. Chem closed the lunchbox, acknowledgement silent but clear, the subtle intimacy of shared care threading deeper than words. Later in the car they drove toward the university, the engines hum a low accompaniment to quiet awareness. No family presence, no audience, only the rhythm of shared space and subtle gestures. Dao leaned against the seat, watching the world pass, feeling the quiet weight of connection that had grown between them, a current threading through every glance and breath. Chem drove with measured attention, her focus unwavering, yet the shared intimacy lingered, a silent understanding, a tether strengthened by care, attention, and something that neither could fully name but both felt entirely.